Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to begin our online forum this afternoon, and we're using a non-webinar account, so it's going to be, bear with us, a little more informal than we typically do these. But the content, I think, today is something I'm really, really interested in, and something I felt so strongly about that I wanted you all to experience it as well and learn about it. So, before I begin, I want to recognize I'm Les Purnell, I should say. I'm the National Director for Stop Predatory Gambling. Um, and we're joined by a few guests. I just want to special guests I want to recognize before we begin. We're joined by Professor John Kint, retired professor from the University of Illinois. We have Dr. Jonathan Cohen with us, who's the author of two prominent books on commercialized gambling. I encourage you to read one on state lotteries, and the other is on commercialized sports gambling. And then we're also joined by our national board chairman, Dr. Jonathan Kreutz, who does yeoman's work to keep our organization growing and prospering. So thankful for all of you and all of you who joined us today. Um, and so before I begin here, I just want to see from a screen perspective here, and admit these last few folks. Um, I want to, and I'm going to try to make sure this maximize the screen. I think you have the ability on your respective screens to maximize the speaker when he or she is speaking. So I encourage you to do so. Um, with that, I'm going to, and feel free, if there's any comments in the chat, feel free to put those in if you want to, as we go forward with this. We encourage strong audience participation in anything that we do, but especially these types of forums. Um, so with that, I'm going to introduce our guest speaker here today, and to kind of set this up a little bit. The reason why we're having this forum is I had a chance to listen to Dr. Goodall do a presentation on online lotteries, particularly at their these state-run casino apps. And honestly, like, I work on this issue every day, pretty much every day of my life. And like, I learned so much from Noah, just hearing him talk about how states are doing this and the business practices they're using. And we're living in a time where DraftKings and FanDuel are getting huge headlines for their extreme, predatory and manipulative business practices, as they rightly should be. But these state-run casino apps that states like Virginia are offering, and other states, Michigan and so on, have completely gone under the radar screen, and they're extracting huge, huge sums of money out of the daily lives of the American people. And so I think what Dr. Goodall is going to present here today is something that, there's many journalists on this call today. My hope is that this is a kind of an entry point for you to really start digging into what, lotteries have been the backbone of predatory gambling, the foundation of predatory gambling for 40 years. What they're doing now is more extreme than they've ever done. And I think after listening to Dr. Goodall's presentation, you'll understand why. So with that, I'm going to open it up to Dr. Goodall. I was going to say, no background on him. Dr. Goodall directs a 501c3 nonprofit called Open Book Research, where he conducts public interest research on important topics such as predatory gambling, gun violence, junk science in the courts, and autonomous vehicle safety. Since 2024, Dr. Goodall has focused on analyzing state-run online casino applications, but with a particular emphasis on the Virginia Lotteries' almost $3 billion annual internet gambling platform. And professionally, Dr. Goodall serves as a transportation researcher, holds a PhD from the University of Virginia, and is a licensed engineer in Virginia. So with that, Dr. Goodall, I'll turn it over to you, and I'll turn off my camera.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. Let's minimize this. Okay, so I won't be able to see chats while this is going. So if you chat something, I don't respond. That's why I have to have this on full screen. But yeah, really excited to be here today. I'm going to be talking about the state-run lottery apps, particularly the casino-style games that are on the apps. I'm fortunate enough to live in Virginia, which has been one of the leading states in this front. I got into this originally because I saw a lot of ads on TV for the lottery app, and I wanted to know how much they were spending on it, because I always find it strange when a state agency that has essentially a monopoly spends money on ads. But that got me looking into how much money this brings in, and that really got my attention. And the little image to the right here is not a mistake. That's actually the app. Every time I open it, it tries to enable notifications. I say no every time, and it continually asks me. It's asked me about 100 times at this point. And it's a good example of the pervasive nature of these and how they're have kind of a predatory nature to these apps. So let's talk about what I'm not talking about. State lotteries have a lot of different products. There's your draw games like Powerball, Mega Millions, your instant games like your scratch off tickets that you buy from the store, your daily games, you pick three, pick four, and then Keno, which is and in Virginia that's every 4 minutes. These are all kind of generally old style. These are the ones you would get from the store. They're you buy the ticket, you scratch something off. That's not what we're talking about here. We are talking about the new products. They have a lot of names for it. Virginia uses iLottery Instant. iLottery seems to be kind of the preferred name. But what it essentially is, it's a state-run product on typically the phone app that it runs essentially a casino style app. It's a slot machine essentially. So in Virginia, they launched this in July 2020. In the last year, fiscal year 2024, Virginia runs June to June fiscal year, so it's 2.9 billion in annual sales. To give you some context, all of sports betting in Virginia is 4.9 billion. So the Virginia Lottery is just under that, about half of that, even though no one's really ever heard of it. It also outsells every other lottery product combined. So I'm talking about Mega Millions, Keno, Powerball, all that stuff. Virginia Lottery, this app with the little casino games, is doing more in sales than all those products combined. Hosted on the Virginia Lottery app. The operator is Neopolitan Interactive. It operates similar products in other states, Michigan, North Carolina, New Hampshire, Virginia, and also West Virginia. To give you an idea what this looks like, so this is a screenshot directly from the app. From my account, I have $10 in there. You have your conventional lottery features. You can do other things with the app. You can check, you see if your numbers are winning. You can check, you can purchase scratch offs. You can play Mega Millions. But what I'm talking about is the casino style games. So they call them iLottery, and they're typically in this format of a 5x3 multiple pay line slots. And so this is the one that was very popular a few months back. Let's make a deal with Wayne Brady there, with the celebrity promotion coming in to play. And just to give you a scale of what kind of business these are doing. So this is from the last year we have data, fiscal year 2024. This is ending June 30th, 2024. Here's where it's done. The blue line is every other product that Virginia Lottery does. That's everything, all the sales they've done for decades. And notice how it's staying flat all through this. The orange is the iLottery Instant product that launched, and you can see the sales are absolutely skyrocketing. It now exceeds the sales of all the products combined, and it's not slowing down. I just checked last quarter; it was they were projected it to be up 12%. It was actually up 14%, when every other product was either flat or down. This is the only thing that's growing for them, and it's not really eating into their core products. This is just new revenue, completely new revenue stream. I was surprised. I thought it would take away from the existing products. Not at all. It seems to be completely secondary. Let's talk about some of the risks of why this product I think is particularly dangerous. It's got a bunch of aspects to it that are known to be linked to problem gambling. One is extremely high speed of play, right? Each spin is what, 2, 3 seconds. So you can bet very, very fast. That's a thing that's known to cause addictive behaviors, particularly in slot machines, is that kind of high speed of play, getting into a zone, getting into a flow state. You also have an autoplay option. I've got there in the image there. If you don't want to sit there and click the button every time, you can just select autoplay. It'll play until your money's depleted. It's available 24/7, right? Casinos have to close once in a while to clean, right? The store isn't open to buy Powerball tickets from. This is all night, all day, holidays, anytime you want. It's always there. The thing that always really bothers me about this is also the fact that it's available on the app. And so it's very discreet. You can look like you're checking your email, but you're playing slots. So it's very easy to hide from loved ones. It's hard to identify someone has a problem because it just looks relatively harmless and very easy to hide. Uh, Virginia Lottery app specifically has a lot of in-app marketing. So a few examples. It's always asking me to turn on notifications. I don't want notifications, but I have to tell it every time I log in, don't give me notifications. Why do they want notifications? Obviously, they can start sending promotions. They can start sending these promos. Here's one from last October. Make a deposit, get a $5 bonus credit. On the website Reddit, there's a subreddit specifically for the Virginia Lottery, and they talk about the promos, which ones are the good ones, which ones are the bad ones, and trying to get those promos right as a way to kind of encourage players to get repeat business to kind of lock them in. They're pretty aggressive with that. Another thing is the betting limits. I was surprised at how high they were. I assumed it was like maybe $1 a play. A lot of the games let you do $50 per spin. I called around to some of the local casinos in Richmond, Richmond, Virginia, where the state capital of Virginia, and they max out at $10 per pull. So Virginia Lottery is perfectly comfortable letting you play $50 per pull on a lot of their apps, which I find quite high. The payout rate is about 90% is returned, but even at that, at $50 per play, you can gamble through $5,000 in about an hour and a half. So that's quite surprising. They do have a monthly deposit limit. You can only deposit $5,000 per month, which seems somewhat reasonable. I guess sportsbooks don't have any, but that's $60,000 a year, and that's everybody. So an 18-year-old who's in college taking out student loans can gladly deposit $5,000 a month and lose it, and up to $60,000 a year, without anyone checking or anyone knowing. A few other things that I found really surprising about how this works is deposited funds have to be gambled before they can be withdrawn. So so on this example, here's my account. I had $24 in there, and I wanted to withdraw it, and I can't. They said, no, you have $0 you can withdraw. You have to gamble that. You have to go in and spin this thing so many times until you've used your money. Only then can you pull the rewards. So ideally, it'd be about 90% of that, but it's probably less. I cannot get an answer for why this must be. I've heard some rumblings that it's a situation with like a money laundering prevention thing. If anyone knows, please let me know. Because even sports books, if you put money in, you can definitely withdraw it without gambling it, without playing it. So I find that uh, very frustrating. And they also do kind of the standard casino tricks. So one is the losses disguised as wins, which I think everyone here is familiar with. That's where the stated odds are include plays where your winning, quote unquote, is less than your initial bet. And so when you bet $5 and you win $1, the game lights up and you feel like you won, but you actually lost $4. They do that a lot. So let's make a deal an example. The odds of winning, and they say this all over the site, is 1 in 3.75. Well, I pulled the odds table, which is available if you click through several layers deep in the app, and I put it into Excel and I ran the math. Your odds of actually winning more than your initial bet is 1 in 7.86. That's half the stated odds. So just another kind of classic misdirection, manipulation. I find it more problematic because it's got the Virginia Lottery branding, because it's a state agency. There's a certain level of trust that the customers have with it. And when they do kind of shady stuff like this, it takes advantage of that trust. And we're already starting to see some impacts of this. It's not just everyone's gambling and having a great time. We're seeing way more calls to the Virginia Council for Problem Gambling helpline. They had 15,000 calls last in 2024. That's a 49% increase from the year before. And if on the right here, I'm taking this from their annual report. This is the breakdown of why people were calling, what they were calling about. And it's sports gambling is not number one. Slots at casinos are not number one. It's these internet non-sports gambling, like the hotline, like the iLottery products. That's what they're calling about. That is the number one issue. So these are highly addictive, and it's starting to show up in the data. Interestingly, I was watching the last Virginia Lottery board meeting, and they talked about these numbers and how the calls were going up to the problem gambling line. And their response was, oh, it must be because we're marketing it so well. We're putting signs up in the casinos. So that must be why people are calling, as if doubling your revenue in 4 years wouldn't cause a surrogate increase in addictive behavior. I found that pretty funny. And just to put that into context here, this is the graph from before. So this is all other lottery sales, iLottery instant sales in orange, and then you can see the helpline calls correspondingly just rocketing up along with that additional gambling behavior. One piece of silver lining with this is that we have a lot of new data. I find this really fascinating, and I've been really trying to push this with the lottery with not much success yet. But let me explain what I mean. The Virginia Lottery currently lives under this fantasy that they don't know who their customers are because they're operating from that old brick and mortar model. where people come in and buy a ticket and then they scratch it off and they win, but they have no idea who's buying the tickets because they don't check IDs at these things. And so they can live under this fantasy that everyone is gambling safely and recreationally because they don't know of any problem gambling. And then the idea that oh, those few problem gamblers are able to seek help, and aren't we doing such a great job? Here's what has changed with the iLottery product is they have way more data than they ever had before that they are actively ignoring. For example, when you sign up for an account with the Virginia Lottery, you have to enter your social security number. It's doing age verification. I know this because I tried to get my son to sign up for an account to see if it would work, and it did not. So they do age verification with the social security number. They also know if you have any debts to the state. There's stories of people when they get a big win, all of a sudden they find out they actually owed money to the University of Virginia Hospital, which is a state agency, and they garnish the winnings to pay those bills, hospital bills, student loans, back taxes. They will garnish your wages for that. So when you win, clearly they're checking your social security number against this database of outstanding debts to the state. So they know you, they know who you are, they know how old you are, they know where you live, they know what you owe to the state. I'm assuming they're hooking this into the tax info. So they theoretically could know a lot more about your finances. So what I'm saying is this, they could have a person who's 19 years old, who is an undergraduate in college, who is taking out $30,000 in student loans every year through the state, who is gambling $5,000 a month, and they wouldn't care. Okay, so so my question to them is always, you guys say there's no problem gambling, that everyone's kind of is self-monitoring, but go look. Who is gambling $5,000 a month? Do they have what was their tax return the year before? Do they have earned income to justify that, or was it very, very low? This is the kind of stuff that they have just kind of conveniently said, oh, that's not an issue. But there's a ton of data. There's a ton to learn about who is actually gambling and who's gambling the maximum. And are these really the people you think they are, or is it people who they're getting themselves in quite a jam? So I'm trying to push them to kind of look at that data and explore that and kind of understand who their customers are in a way they haven't before. Let's look a little bit behind the curtain of who's operating these. And none of the states I know of do they actually build their own software and actually run these apps on their own. I know of 5 states that are doing it, and they're all operated by Neopollard Interactive, which I believe is a Canadian company, but don't quote me on that. So, and Neopollard Interactive is actually a joint operation between Pollard Banknote Limited and Aristocrat Interactive. Aristocrat Interactive used to be Neo Games, I believe. Just to give you some structure of kind of like how these come together. It is another issue I've been having is that Neopollard Interactive charges a percentage of sales, which is, I think, the wrong incentive structure to handle these because that encourages them to generate addictive behavior because the more people spend, the more Neopollard makes. Ideally, this should be some kind of flat fee structure with slight increases for um, costs that don't or costs that scale, excuse me. But as it stands now, they're taking a percentage of the sales, and so they're incentivized to increase gambling activity as much as possible. And whereas I don't know about the Pollard banknote, but Aristocrat Interactive gave an interview recently, and they were bragging about all the former state lottery employees they brought over to help with business development. So they're recruiting actively from state lotteries. So we have their current vice president of customer development was former Virginia Lottery for 25 years. Director of customer marketing North America, Virginia Lottery. Marketing director from New Hampshire, weirdly from Kentucky, the account director from New Hampshire, former Massachusetts, and the digital games coordinator from the New Hampshire Lottery. So keep that in mind. Virginia and New Hampshire, right? Look who their previous customers were, New Hampshire and Virginia. So they're clearly getting contracts and then promptly recruiting those same employees back over to work for them to spread this to other states, which is just not my favorite behavior. And this is all, you can read this. I've linked to the story below. Also, not only that, but they're starting to leverage any state lottery app, even if they don't do these casino style games, to use those for customer acquisition. And this is a direct quote from their vice president, North America and customer development. So he's saying that even the apps that let you cash your retail tickets using your phone, or check the tickets to see if the winning number is correct, that's an acquisition tool to grow the player database. Provides valuable insights into player behavior that can be leveraged to deliver timely, relevant, personalized content, right? All these things that we've seen casinos do for years, these are now happening with these state-run applications. So a few recommendations for how I think they could start to manage these things. It's very hard to get them to kill off these programs because they're such consistent revenue generators. The reason the state likes it so much is Powerball revenue can be up and down depending on how big the jackpot is. But iLottery is this consistent, like clockwork revenue stream. So some things to mitigate the damage here is lower per play bet sizes. $50 a bet is absolutely insane for a smartphone app run by the state. And that needs to be down. I think it should be below 10. I think it should be like 5. I'd like it to be 1 personally. What we know about slot machine players is a lot of them aren't trying to win money. They're playing to get in the flow state and get into a zone. And so keep that bet size as small as possible to delay that as much as you can. A slower speed of play, right? The high speed of play has been linked to addiction. So let's slow that down. We can do that in the app. It's just a line of code. Easy opt out of notifications, right? I cannot opt out of these notifications no matter how hard I try. And I should be able to say that one time, don't notify me, and it respects that and leaves me alone. That's just a classic. Otherwise, they can be sending me updates and incentives all night, all day. Eliminate the deposit incentives. If customers want to gamble, let them gamble. You don't need to incentivize them to do that. This is a state agency. They have a duty to protect their citizens. This is completely unnecessary and frankly encourages more addictive behavior. Uh, I would like unlimited frictionless withdrawals. If you deposit $1,000 and then change your mind and say, want that money back, I don't want to gamble that, and the state says, no, you must gamble that money before you can withdraw it, that's unconscionable. So that should be changed tomorrow. If you put your money in, that's your money. You should be able to get it right back out. I don't care if you gambled it or not. Transparency and odds. These losses disguised as wins. That's an old tactic borrowed from the casinos. That should be eliminated immediately. It should have two different odds. One is your odds of getting any kind of win, and one is your odds of actually winning. And they should also post the return of these products, which are calculable from stated odds, the stated odds sheet. It just takes a lot of math. But just say, okay, this is a 90% return. This is a 70% return. Just say it up front. I'd like to see some independent audits for these predatory tactics I'm showing. I'm sure there's some work on near misses, and I know they have some audits to ensure that the odds are what were advertised, but they could be doing so much more to look at these things I'm listing, these things that I found just from using the app for 5 minutes. They could have an independent group doing some audits, looking for these kinds of predatory tactics, notifying the Virginia Lottery of those tactics, and letting them know. And as I talked about earlier, the app operator, I don't think should be paid a percentage of the revenue, but instead a flat fee with some incentives for things like good customer service, site uptime, and any cost that scale with volume. Obviously, they need some additional resources to handle that. But as far as operating as a service, that should be more of a flat fee. It's software. That way, they're not incentivized to encourage addictive behavior. And then look at identifying and restricting problem gamblers. Hardest I've laughed in the last few months was at a recent Virginia Lottery Board meeting, and one of the staff said, "Oh, we're starting to look into maybe using AI to identify people who might have a gambling problem early, and then we can notify them and maybe work in and to kind of help them out, and AI will let us do that." And I just laughed because I think we've been able to do that since the invention of the spreadsheet, maybe since the invention of the paper ledger. Ask the industry, ask Las Vegas. They know how to identify problem gambler. That's never been. You don't need AI for that in any way, shape, or form. Some strategies I've been working on to try to kind of get a little closer to this and understand what's going on is one. What's really nice about the state lotteries is they are subject to open records requests. So if you're not familiar, open records requests are basically the state version of the Freedom of Information Act, and that means that all states have to have them. Lottery commissions are subject, and so essentially, if a state agency that is subject to open records requests, which state lotteries are, if they have a document or a file that's been generated and there's no privacy issue, it's not getting someone's social security number out of this, then you, a citizen, are entitled to a copy. That's paid for with state money. You get to have a copy. So they are fairly responsive to these as well. These are not big agencies. When I've filed open records requests, often I'm talking to their chief counsel. It's not some like FOIA specialist. So that's been pretty responsive to things that existing documents. So some tips for how to do these. It's a lot easier to get copies of existing documents than it is to get new data or stuff that's hard to collect. So if you want copies of like emails around some issue, that's really hard. But if you want a copy of the contract they have with Neo Pollard, that's very easy. any kind of audits, anything they mention in an annual report or a board meeting, like some files or statistics, you can ask for the full version of that, or the Excel spreadsheet representing that. That's been pretty productive. And also, if you want to get into doing open records requests, I'm a big fan of these. I've used these in a lot of other projects. I will say large language models are very good at writing open records requests. ChatGPT and Claude, are the two I use, because they match language of other requests and they know how to cite the relevant statutes. But they will try to expand their open records request into like all kinds of things, and make it so big that it won't get answered. So you need to kind of keep it focused on the exact thing you want. And then with these open records requests, you want to check the law and you need to follow up consistently. Most states are required to respond within a certain time frame, but that response can just be, we're looking into it. And so you want to follow up with, they'll stall delivery almost indefinitely. So they'll say, we're looking into it, and you hear nothing for a year. So just nudge them once a week and be very, very nice. They're much quicker to respond if they feel like you're not being aggressive or you're not going to use it against them. And also, you're talking to a human being who generally wants to help. So just some kindness goes a long way here. Another thing that's nice about with state lotteries is they do have board meetings, and they're generally open to the public. At least in Virginia, you can provide public comment. You get about 3 minutes. It's very easy to get in because they're very sparsely attended. I've watched for about a year. I'm the only one who's ever gone to one of these, at least in Virginia. And it's important to go because in Virginia, at least, the board members are prohibited from using the app. They're not allowed to use any gambling products. And so they don't actually know what's in the app. So I give a handout with screenshots of the things I'm talking about because I don't think they know this. They only know what the contractor has told them because they're prohibited by law from using the app. And that's what I say when I show up. I'm like, I'm here to tell you how this thing works because I know you guys aren't allowed to use it. I think that's really important to give them some kind of on the ground context of what this product, they see the revenue and they see all the money coming in, but they don't see the downsides there. So thank you very much for that, and happy to take questions now.
Sure. So, no, that was great stuff. I have a couple questions to kick you off, and then I know there's several questions that are in the chat, and I encourage those of you who are in the audience to share your own, if you have some questions. I don't know if we'll get to all of them there, but we'll do our best to get to them. Please type them into the chat, and we'll pose them to Dr. Goodall. So, Noah, let's start with one question to you. You mentioned that you tried to get your son to sign up on the Virginia Lottery app. But my question to you is, like a state like Michigan, and this one I know from firsthand experience because I've been on the Michigan uh, Internet Lottery website, is so yes, you have to actually sign up and start spending money on those state casino apps. You have to put in your social security number, but many of them are what's called free to play to begin, that you can begin, like the state of Michigan had a game that was called the Wizard of Odds. And it was all like cartoon-like figures targeted clearly to a generation that has grown up on Harry Potter movies and books. And there was nothing about it that looked like it was a gambling game, but it was free to play. And then once you get the habit down, build that muscle memory of playing this game, then you can start playing for real money. So I'm curious, um, you know, does the Virginia Lottery have free to play type experiences for people which I assume are no age requirements? Because I would suggest to you, if they're free to play, they're clearly targeting kids to get hooked on this stuff and then ultimately get into these games when they're of age or get access to their parents' credit card. So what's the experience in Virginia? What does that look like there?
That's a good question. So I know they do have free to play. All of them have that option. I don't know if under 21 is allowed to do that. My memory is through the app. You have to have an account to even get into the app, but there might be a way through the website, but I have to double check
I
that.
did it through my computer. So
Hmm.
I would maybe when we're done, maybe the next week day or two, to just go on the site and just see what that experience. Because my sense is, if Neil Pollard is running it in Michigan, it's going to be a similar process. So just for all of you in all your different states, like the free to play aspect of this, forget gambling games for a second. All of these, you're seeing all these apps, the free to play experience is a way to get suck people in. It's giving out free smokes, in poor neighborhoods, 50 years ago. It's the free cigarettes, handing out products that are highly addictive, and so they go back to them. So anyway, that's a big question. So if you could look into that, I'd be grateful. And then my other question, and then we'll open it up, is I'm wondering if any of your research like we know that the Wall Street Journal, for example, in the spring of 2024, that they um, uh, got internal records from one online casino operator that showed 70% of their online gambling profits were coming from 0.5% of the people using the online casino apps. So I'm wondering, in your freedom of information requests, have you been able to get a window into what percentage of profits are coming from, say, 1% of users of the Virginia Lottery app? And any sense of that? And is that something, if you haven't, I wonder if I'd encourage you to put a FOIA into that to kind of get a sense of what their breakdown is.
Yeah, my FOIA is written in a somewhat of a vague way to kind of be a workaround because they didn't know I was actively going after them at the time, which was yeah, just trying to get like some kind of aggregate level of play rates by income level or by like just even by user, just like percentiles of that thing. I have not gotten a response back from that. I think they've kind of figured out what I'm going for and are stalling now. So I'm hoping to get like a state legislator kind of join up and really kind of push them on that front.
Okay. Good. That's a target area for sure. So if we'll kind of, I'll talk offline about that a little bit. So now I'm going to kind of turn to some of the questions in the meeting chat. I see some folks with their hands up just for the sake of moderation. Like we're not going to kind of open this up where people are asking questions directly. We're going to, if you just do it through the chat, it just becomes a lot more orderly and the user experience is better for everybody on the Zoom call. So one of the first questions that was raised, and I guess Noah, this was a more of a political question, but Virginia's seen as a state that's a so-called swing state, right? You got you have a blue and red there fight pretty aggressively over the politics. So this gentleman's question is how does the data that you shared, you know, do you think the political left in America would respond to that? Like, why don't you think the political left in Virginia and other states don't see those facts and respond the way you think they'd respond? And you may not feel comfortable answering that question, but that's what he posed, and I think it's an important question. But I just wonder if you have any thoughts on it.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I haven't seen a big left-right difference, at least in my experience. My thing is like you want to critique something, it helps to have some data behind it, and it's been tough to get data. We know how much money they contribute to the schools, and they hammer that really, really hard. And so any kind of restriction, you're taking money from schools. So you have to offset that with here's the cost of that you're not seeing. And so I'm just trying to get to those costs. Like, I think we can get the money for the schools without exploiting our most vulnerable users. And I really want to justify the cost to that aren't recorded, right? It's not just financial costs. I had a friend whose husband had a gambling addiction. His was sports betting, and he was able to hide it because it was all on the phone. And one day, her landlord calls. She's like, "Where's the rent? You guys are 3 months behind." She didn't know that he had gambled it all, right? And now that they were looking at possibly an eviction, and for them, I guess the Virginia Lottery, the 5,000 a month, that I guess to them that seems low, but to a lot of people that's life-changing amount of money to be losing and not knowing about it. So I'm just trying to get those costs and down, and then I can take that to people who are influenced by that. But I haven't seen a big left-right difference, at least in my experience.
Okay. So thank you. The next question comes from Dr. Jonathan Cohen, uh, who's extremely well versed in all issues related to state sanctioned gambling, and he asks the question from what you've been able to see in Virginia, Noah. Is there any functional distinction between internet lottery games, online lottery games versus internet casino gambling games online, that are legal in 7 of the states in the country?
I'm not sure the exact terminology difference, and I haven't played any non-state run lottery games, so I couldn't say specifically. I guess when I'm referring to it, I'm specifically looking at ones that are run by the state because they have different um they're accountable in a different way. And you can actually talk to the agency running it and they have to respond to you. So yeah, I can't say specifically any differences there.
Yeah. The only thing I would say to Dr. Cohen's question is that generally how this would work is I think the way, even though the user experience for these online casino apps that state lotteries are pushing out are very similar to an traditional online casino app that we see from DraftKings or FanDuel. I think what would be different would be from a functional standpoint would just be the math on the inside of the experience. So the user experience from me or you, we wouldn't really notice a difference, but the way these games pay out, the math in them would be different, like the payouts, that type of thing, to make them, because in theory, a lottery game will have to be I'm playing against other players in some infinite world, whereas a casino game is technically playing against the house. So, but for all that's the only thing I can imagine is just to be the tweak would be in the math itself.
Yeah, without knowing specifically, I know the iLottery games, at least in Virginia, they are publishing the payout percentages, things like that, and the odds ratios are very explicitly provided. I'm not sure that's the case. I assume that's not the case in the general iGaming.
Yeah. So, no, the next question goes into it was either slide number 9 or slide number 10. You had some really, really good stuff in the right on those slides. And the question comes that could you just please confirm for the audience that if someone puts money into a Virginia Internet Lottery app, that they can only withdraw any money that they win, that they cannot withdraw the money that they actually, the original money they put in, they cannot pull that out. Can you just, that's 100% accurate?
As of October, last I checked it, I haven't checked it since then,
Understood.
but that was the
I think
policy.
that's, but that's been your user experience that they
I
don't
just
allow you to withdraw money, like,
Yeah,
which
I
is
have
just,
screenshots where I have $24 in the account and they say you have zero, you can withdraw. You have to gamble it. What they do is they keep two different amounts going. So there's the amount you put in and the amount that you have won. You may withdraw the winnings, you can regamble the winnings, but you may not withdraw the initial investment.
yeah.
I
And
just
I
maybe
would
there's a way
say,
to call them and kind of demand it back if it's a large amount, but you cannot do it through the app.
yeah, the only thing I would say, speculating, you said you would ask why that was the case, and someone had said, well, maybe it has to do with money laundering. I mean, lotteries and money laundering have been joined at the hip for 40 years since they came in. So I don't think it has to do with money laundering. My sense is I think the lottery rationalizes this predatory tactic by saying, like, if I go buy, a $50 scratch off ticket, like I can't return that, right? Like so I think that's the kind of practice where, like, generally, these are products once the sale has been committed that you can't, but at least when it comes to lotteries, because they have their own set of rules that generally you can't, on the brick and mortar side, that's been the user experience. So I'm assuming that may have something to do with that. But I think if you're a journalist on this call, like that's a question really to dig into is because I think the American public would be shocked to know that people aren't allowed to withdraw any initial money they put in to their accounts. All right. Next question is, well, there was a question about the National Council on Problem Gambling, and I don't think you'd be necessarily particularly versed on that. No, I don't know if you want to comment. The question dealt with, you know, some of these problem gambling councils, like Virginia, are really tied at the hip in many ways with the commercialized gambling industry. So I don't know if you want to comment
Yeah,
on that question. It's true. That's a true statement what the woman raised in the chat. But I don't know if you want to give any comments or experience that you've had on that topic.
yeah, I'll let you handle the national one, but I know the Virginia one does receive money from the gambling industry. I actually got on them in their FAQ. There were some things that were extremely blaming of people with gambling addiction problems, as if it was entirely their fault, and that language is just atrocious. So yeah, they definitely are funded by the industry. I always take that with a grain of salt, but they do provide the only hotline in Virginia. So.
Yeah. So the next question, Noah, is, and this is something where this is an issue that's always changing. So like I know, for this year, I'm pretty sure we were successful. In my own state, I know of Massachusetts, they were trying to push this through. But as of now, what is your expertise in terms of how many states are actually operating these internet casino apps? That's, the state-run casino apps.
Yeah, I
I know
haven't
you
done
showed
an
5 on the
exhaustive.
screen.
Yeah, I have not done an exhaustive search. There could be more, but those are the ones I'm familiar with.
Okay.
Based on I kind of start from Virginia, kind of work my way out. So those
Yeah.
are all the ones that are operated similarly.
Yeah, and so I think that's from one of our national board members, Rhonda Hatterfy. So that's a question that, frankly, like kind of underscores even my own experience with this topic of online lotteries. Is we've been focused on, the the sports gambling fights, the online casino fights, and brick and mortar casino fights. We have not really been as it's been the online uh, casino apps being pushed by state lotteries is not something we have put enough energy into and invested enough effort into. And so, like I know that at least a handful, but I do think there's a little more than the folks that than those states that we showed up there because they push these through. Most of the legislators have very little understanding, almost no understanding what they're voting on. So they're marketed oftentimes as online scratch off tickets. So they're like, oh, what's the big deal, right? We're just gonna, we're really what you're seeing is online casino games.
Yeah, I don't think it's that widespread, and that's why I push it so hard because the numbers are, from their perspective, the numbers are great, and this is this great, consistent revenue stream that just grows. You don't have to put anything into it, and they love it. I'm concerned when other states hear about it, they're going to be jumping on it, and it's very easy to sneak in. This thing generated a lot of revenue without the public or the media really knowing about it.
Yeah,
That's what really bothers me.
sure. Thank you. So the next question comes in is, could you please, Noah, could you please speak more about gamblers who are winning big, and then the state comes back to them and says, well, what about these outstanding debts you have to, the Virginia Protective Services or whatever you mentioned? Like, do you have uh, any specific examples or instances of this happening? Like,
Not a ton. So I knew about it from the fine print. They had said that, so I knew that was a possibility. I didn't know if it actually happened. My main experience is I lurk on some of the Reddit forums because people talk about this, and that came up the Virginia problem gambling. And there's a college student who had gambled a lot. She finally hit $1,000 jackpot, and she was like, "Okay, good. This will give me some breathing room. I can pay my student loans off." And no, she had an outstanding bill for the University of Virginia Hospital, and they yanked it right there. And so that confirmed kind of what I'd read. So that's really all I know about it.
well, but to expand on this question to the gentleman who asked it, like we know for brick and traditional state lottery games, if you buy a $50 scratch off ticket and you win, say two or $3,000 on it, you get one of the rare tickets that actually makes any money, and you go to cash that at a lottery outlet, a lot of retail folks when they cash the tickets, they actually will run your name even at that level. They will run your name against any outstanding debts you have. So that already happens with lottery games in our country, and so because it's not really. I think because it's going online and it's the amount of money we're talking about here is big, like $50 a wager every spin on an online slot. So
Yeah.
the stakes are higher, but that type of business practice has been happening with lotteries for really since that we've been involved, at least the last 30 years.
Yeah. What I think is so interesting about that is because they have your info as you're buying, not only do they know when you win, they know when you play. And so they could look up your stated income from last year against how much you're gambling. That's really useful data to see kind of what kind of scale this is and who your customers are in a way that they're kind of like to remain blissfully ignorant of. That's why I find this so interesting.
Okay, thank you. So this next question comes in from Professor John Kint, and he says, are you associated with the former director Adam Andrzejewski's of Open the Books in Illinois and Florida? So
No,
I'm
I'm
not
not familiar with that at all.
okay. All right. Uh, and anyone else? We have one more question. If anyone else wants to pose a question, feel free to put it in the chat. Otherwise, we'll start to wind down here. But this question comes in from our national board chairman, Jonathan Kreutz. Says, Dr. Goodall, thank you for your initiative to shine a light on this little studied area of commercialized gambling. Um, you're asking good questions for information that policymakers need to be aware of. Thank you for your leadership. So I get more of a big thank you rather than a question, but that's really on behalf of our national board. Um,
Thank you.
this question came in from Skip Armistead of Tennessee. When a person signs up for these apps, do they have to list their income, or you're saying they can identify their income because they have this person's social security number?
Yeah. So no, they don't have to list your income. You have to give your social security number, which they check against your age. And they seem to have some access to your debts to the state via when you win, they check against databases of your debts. So they can pull them. So I'm conjecturing that they can link your social security number to your tax return info and know more about you that way. So they can see if someone's gambling 60,000 a year, but they only claim 20,000 in income in the last tax return. That's a problem. That's something. So what I'm saying is that there's more data they might be able to play with here, and I encourage them to do that.
Sure. All right. The next question, actually, I think we know this should be a short answer on this one, but there's a gentleman raises the question. Uh, you have to be a resident of Virginia, correct, to play the Virginia Internet Casino Lottery. Like, is that correct? You have to be to play these casino apps. You have to be a Virginia uh, a resident, or you just have to be within the city. You have to be in the within the state borders of the Virginia lottery.
I'm 90% sure you just have to be physically located within the state.
Yeah,
There's a possibility you have to be a resident. I can't recall.
yeah. Just to clarify, it's the form. You just have to be within the state borders. You can be from California, but if you're in Richmond, Virginia, you can be doing these apps. But as we know, we've seen with DraftKings and FanDuel, especially for the young people, it'd be interesting to know if someone who lives in uh, Tennessee can use a virtual private network to sign into the Virginia lottery app. So I don't know if that's the case, but I do know if you're out of state, you can play the free to play games on the Virginia lottery website. So you don't have to be a Virginia resident, within the Virginia borders to do the free to play games. So when you're playing for money is when you have to start to, in theory, but to be within the state's borders. Um, all right. Next one is a couple more quick questions here. Does the Virginia Lottery, this is a good question here. Does the Virginia Lottery take credit cards for online betting like they do in Illinois? Do you
They do
know?
not. I tried that. They also do not accept prepaid gift cards. I tried that loophole as well. So
Okay.
it has to be a debit card from what I can tell.
Yeah. So apparently they do not take it. All right. And let's kind of wind down with this one. In New York State, the claim that lottery revenue increases total state spending on education has been debunked. Um, Yeah, the gentleman raises the question just how we claim this is a revenue source for states, but the reality is that we talk about data. The data is overwhelming that the revenues that government extracts from predatory gambling is really the ultimate budget gimmick. It doesn't really increase education spending. It just reshuffles the deck. It's not really new spending going into education. That's part of the con of this whole thing. So he was just kind of emphasizing that point. No, I'm going to turn it back to you for any kind of final words. But I just want to say for those of you who understand why this issue matters so much, like why we focus on this, why we're so passionate on it, is that what Dr. Goodall has outlined here is we have a system in America today of taxation by exploitation. So those aren't Dr. Goodall's not going to frame it that way because he's a scholar. We're advocates for reform in terms of major reform. Unless we see this as one of America's most neglected major problems. And we have a system of taxation by exploitation, and it's time that we had a system. We had the democratic principle of no taxation um, by exploitation right alongside the principle of no taxation without representation. So with that, Dr. Goodall, any final words before we wrap up today that you'd like to, for those who attended and those who will be watching this on video later?
Yeah, just the last one. It's kind of touches on that last question that came in. Was just uh, how I've been shocked at how little attention this gets in terms of the dollar amount. Like, and that's my thing I go back to with people is sports gambling makes 4.9 billion in Virginia in sales. And this app that no one has ever heard of, that they run ads for it. I've talked to people, no one knows what I'm talking about. I have to explain it every single time. Is generating just half that 2.4 billion and growing every quarter, 14% last quarter. I just really need some attention on this before it gets completely out of hand, and
Yeah.
before every other state starts copying it. It's
Yeah.
just I'm really
And,
concerned.
and just be clear, we use those numbers like the take what the house takes from sports gambling wagers is generally a lot less. So you might have $6 billion of wagers on sports gambling in Virginia, but the actual take is generally a lot less than what the lottery extracts. You know, uh, the point is in terms of the amount of profits that the citizens end up, the amount of money that citizens end up losing is generally a lot more per capita to lottery type games than it is to sports gambling on a per bet basis, if that makes sense. But um, all right. With that, we'll wind down, and I appreciate everyone being on today's call. We will send out a recording, and we'll also send out Dr. Goodall's slides within the next few days. Once we have access to this recording, we'll do an email nationally to everybody, and you'll have access to it. And some really good content in there. And if you want to we have a national Tuesday call that we do every 2 weeks that Dr. Goodall is often on, kind of presenting us new information as it relates to online casino apps pushed by state lotteries. You want to get access to that or listen to get connected with him, feel free and we'll match you guys up. We'll get you guys involved. All right. Thank you everybody for being on today's call.